Emily Harding, the director of the Intelligence, National Security and Technology Program and deputy director of the International Security Program at CSIS, also formerly at CIA, the National Security Council, as well as the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence.
I would classify the debate inside the U.S. as partially self-deterrence, there's a bucket of that, and then partially self-centered. The self-centered piece is this completely self-defeating debate where you have people saying, well, why are we sending all of these resources off to Ukraine? Why are we spending all of this money on Ukraine when we really should be keeping it here for a fight in the Pacific, or we really should be keeping it here for domestic priorities? It's just the wrong way to look at it. First of all, from a basic numbers perspective, I think Angus King of Maine has a really good speech on this. The money that we spend on Ukraine doesn't leave the U.S. It goes to the U.S. defense industry. It goes to U.S. companies that send aid to Ukraine. The vast majority of it stays here.
So as you look down the road at 2024, Emily, indications and warnings, what should we be looking for that give us a sense of how things are going?
The ones that would change the assessment on the Ukrainian side, I think, are far more likely than the big changes on the Russian side. So I'll go through those first. Option one is that the U.S. passes the aid package. The Europeans don't use that as an opportunity to go phew and then back off of what they've been doing. They also push forward with a massive amount of aid. That Ukraine continues to bring the fight home to the Russians. We were talking about surprises earlier. One of my surprises is how little the Russian population has really felt the pinch of this conflict. If that changes, if we find a way to make the Russian population at home understand the costs of this conflict to them in their hometowns. If we find a way to make the Russian population at home understand the costs of this conflict to them in their hometowns. And then if Ukraine finds a way to pick its battles differently, I mean, I would defer to the military analysts in the room who would know exactly what that would look like. But if they find ways to focus on a particular area and make gains there, I could see that changing that scenario that I laid out for 2024. On the Russian side, it's much more low probability, high impact topics, like could there be Russian troop mutinies? We saw the unpleasantness with the Wagner Group. You know, could something like that happen again on a smaller scale, sort of all along the Russian front lines? Is there a possibility that sometime in 2025 there is a Russian fall off in production of munitions? That would be a game changer, I think, for the conflict if it was actually true and if China didn't come in to save them. And then the real black swan is that something comes of the Navalny murder, that actually turns into some kind of domestic disturbance inside Russia that draws Putin's eye back into Russian domestic problems more than prosecuting the war in Ukraine. You know, the freedom fighter in me really hopes that happens, but I don't really see a lot of indications that could be the way we go.
Terrorist group ISIS-K has claimed responsibility for an attack that has taken over 130 lives at a popular concert hall near Moscow. This same terror group also claimed responsibility for the attack that killed 13 American service members in Afghanistan in August of 2021, and another attack in Iran earlier this year that killed nearly 100. American intelligence officials tell us that the United States warned Russia that they had received information that ISIS-K was plotting an attack in Moscow. It was a warning considered so serious that the U.S. Embassy put out a security alert on March 7th saying that it was monitoring reports that extremists had imminent plans to attack large gatherings, including concerts.
In effect, the United States created ISIS. Nothing like it existed before the American occupation. It was an insurgency that battened on the hatred of the Americans and the vulnerability and hatred of the Sunnis for the Shia. There's no way to understand it happening without the Americans there, because it built itself like a kind of bacterial host on the American occupation. We created it, it's ours, and now we're trying to deal with the consequences. Not for the first time, the United States has shown itself to be a strange hybrid creature, military giant and political dwarf. But Iraq is not Lebanon. from which the U.S. could sail away and invade Grenada. The stakes are much higher. In the words of Hassan Salameh, the former Lebanese government minister and scholar who was working for the UN headquarters in Baghdad when it was bombed, you can't just get up and walk away from Iraq like you did Lebanon. No matter how bad it gets, if Iraq turns into anarchy, it's likely to spill into the rest of the Gulf. It would be a catastrophe. I think it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Watch out what you wish for, you will create it. And that is exactly what the United States ended up doing. Once the U.S. began striking ISIS from the air in August 2014, there was an enormous surge in Islamic State recruitment. Haaretz reported that in the 6 weeks after those airstrikes began, ISIS had recruited 6,000 jihadis, a huge number, in a group that's supposed to number 20 to 30,000. 1,500 of those were foreign fighters. So I think this central perception from the beginning that the Iraq War was a dumb idea, not simply because it was going to be a lot harder and a lot more complicated than it was advertised as being, but it was a dumb idea because ideologically, it was the stupidest thing that the United States could do. But now we're in the new war, and this is the war that we're going to lose. Indeed, it may be that the United States, with its overwhelming military power, has succeeded only in transforming an eventual and speculative threat into a concrete and immediate one. Now the Bush administration finds itself trying to perform the tightrope walk of building a stable and friendly government beneath the shadow of escalating violence and a growing and inevitable nationalism. The administration began its Iraq venture with an air of absolute determination, taking a kind of grim pride in defying the United Nations and doing what is right. America and Iraq will need a different kind of determination now and a newfound honesty to go with it. Don't start a major policy until you know how you're going to finish it. Because when I look at this war against the Islamic State, I don't think our leaders know how it's going to finish.